Chapter 1. The story opens with a group of boys chatting in their group chat. One of them urges everyone to turn on their televisions and watch Coming Fist on the JMTS channel immediately. When another boy questions whether he is exaggerating again, he insists he is not, adding that the class loser, Unsang, has appeared on television. The others react with shock, hurriedly switch on their televisions, and burst into laughter upon realizing that Unsang is actually being beaten up on the show. As Unsang struggles to counter his opponent, the boys mock him in the group chat, calling him a pig and questioning how he ended up there. As he continues taking multiple blows, one of them asks if anyone has seen his first interview. When another boy denies it, the first reveals that Unsang had spoken with confidence, claiming he would prove himself through action rather than words. The group erupts in laughter, but their amusement turns to disbelief as they notice Unsang wearing their school uniform, realizing he is embarrassing both himself and the school. While one of them calls him an attention seeker, another scoffs, questioning whether he wasn't beaten enough at school and had to seek out a show to get beaten again. As the fight concludes, every judge refuses to advance Unsang, referencing his earlier interview. One judge, recalling his bold claim of proving himself physically, asks about his experience after the fight. Unsang remains silent, reflecting that, despite being just a 17-year-old boy, he should still have the chance to prove his worth. Noticing the silence, the judge remarks that Unsang failed to demonstrate any physical ability, just as he had claimed he would. Another judge interjects, speculating that Unsang might have gained confidence after defeating a few school kids. However, instead of confirming this, Unsang hesitates before admitting that he is not good at fighting, but quite the opposite, in fact. The crowd falls into stunned silence, now questioning why he participated despite his lack of skill. Visibly trembling, Unsang confesses that he is nervous and explains the meaning behind his nickname, Tetris Teeth, which he used when applying. He admits to choosing it merely to avoid elimination and apologizes for the deception. As he continues shaking, he likens the 3-minute fight everyone just witnessed to a summary of his entire school life before breaking into tears. He speaks of how life's challenges differ based on money, power, and appearance, then recounts his experiences of being beaten by classmates who followed the orders of their gang leader. While being assaulted, he once looked at the leader, wondering what truly set them apart besides weight and facial structure. He began to grasp the deep unfairness of the world, realizing that no place offered him peace. However, after one particularly brutal beating that left him lying in an alley, a girl approached and asked if he was okay. In that moment, Unsang understood that the rare sympathy he received was the only force keeping him going. Opening his swollen eyes, he recognized the girl as Jian Li, the only kind student in his class full of bullies. As she revealed the ointments she had brought and gently applied them to his wounds, Unsang blushed, seeing her as a beacon of warmth in his miserable world. The next morning, while brushing his teeth, he received a message from Juyan, inviting him to watch a movie with her that weekend. Stunned, he rubbed his eyes and checked again, struggling to believe that this was real and not just another fleeting dream. As Juyan revealed that she had 2 tickets and was planning to watch a movie with her friend, she explained that her friend couldn't come and mentioned that the movie was at 4 p.m. As she asked if he could come, she reassured him that he shouldn't feel pressured, making it clear that she wasn't forcing him. However, Unsang still couldn't process that Juyan had actually sent him a text, inviting him to watch a movie together the next weekend. He thought for a few moments before agreeing to go with her. The next weekend, he managed to reach karaoke Byamchan coins, as Juyan had asked, since she had arrived too early and was hanging out in room 4. Checking his phone, he confirmed that he was at the right place and wondered if he was dressed well enough. Approaching the room, he reflected on his outfit, knowing that he had purposely chosen something simple, a sweater and jeans, while feeling unsure if it looked strange. Before entering, he reminded himself that he needed to express his gratitude to her, knowing she was the only one who had helped him against the bullies. However, as soon as he stepped inside, he froze in shock upon realizing that Juyan was hanging out with a group of their classmates. As he tried to process the situation, sensing that something was wrong, one of the students spotted him and became excited, remarking that he had arrived faster than expected. Mocking him, the students called him an idiot, while Eun-sang still struggled to fully grasp what was happening. Scanning the room, he saw Juyeon, who casually asked her friend to cut the bet in half. When the boy argued that cutting the bet in half was too much, he added that he would have suggested a cut of 50,000 won if he had known Eun-sang would come so easily, and called him stupid. Juyeon laughed, calling her friend greedy, as she said she would still pay him 150,000 won, even if he cut the bet in half. The boy then revealed that he should have won 300,000 won if Eun-sang had confessed to Juyeon within a month, explaining that it had all been a bet worth just 3,000 won. Looking at Eun-sang, the students noticed that he was still confused and praised Juyeon for her acting. Annoyed, she glanced at Eun-sang and remarked that he should have sent a message before coming. Just then, another student returned from the restroom, greeted Eun-sang, and asked Juyeon if she was trying to cheat on her boyfriend. Eun-sang, in shock, called the boy crazy, but the student simply asked if Juyeon felt bad because she had to pay 150,000 won after losing the bet. As Juyeon agreed, the boy quickly pointed at Eun-sang, telling her to stop giving him false hope and to focus on her real boyfriend instead. Hearing that, Eun-sang turned toward Juyeon in disbelief, only to realize that she was sitting beside her boyfriend, who had his arm wrapped around her waist. As Juyeon hugged her boyfriend slightly, she casually remarked that she always took care of him. At that moment, Eun-sang finally understood that everything had been a bet. Recalling the night Juyeon had helped him, he realized that even that had been an act. Moments later, the students dragged Eun-sang to an open area and ordered him to stand still without moving. One of the boys then charged at him at full speed and struck his leg with his knee, sending him crashing to the ground. While some of the others briefly worried that Eun-sang might be hurt, their attention quickly shifted back to Juyeon, who furiously ordered the student to hit him again. Still angry at Eun-sang for not confessing to her and causing her to lose 300,000 won, she demanded that he suffer for it. As the student continued to beat Eun-sang, he lost all hope. After enduring hours of relentless attacks, he lay on the ground, unable to move. Juyeon eventually approached him, apologizing and wishing him luck before walking away. Lying there, Eun-sang burned with rage, questioning why Juyeon had ever acted kind toward him, only to betray him in the end. He wondered what had even made her place a bet against someone like him, a person barely surviving under the weight of suffering. He knew that, after what she had done, he would either be completely crushed from the inside or go insane. As he finishes his story, all the judges approve him and pass him to the next stage. While the audience grows shocked, realizing that every judge has passed him, some begin clapping, praising Eun-sang for his resilience in standing there and fighting after everything he has endured. Meanwhile, the boys in the group chat react with disbelief, calling the program rigged. Eun-sang stands before the judges, tears streaming down his face, as he expresses his gratitude for their decision. As he continues to thank them, he realizes that, for the first time, he has chosen a path different from everyone else, and he has decided to embrace the madness. Chapter 2 Massive audition events remain popular as long as participants have the skills and anyone can step into the spotlight. With higher audience ratings, production costs also rise. Not only do participants compete, but television stations also invest heavily in securing mentors. In the world of Korean martial arts, an athlete named Byamchun Choi stands out. Known as Korea's top UFC fighter and one of the best in the world, he holds third place in the light heavyweight class and continues as an active competitor preparing for the championship. Byamchun Choi selects Eun-sang Lee as one of his team members for Coming Fist Season 2. The second episode of Coming Fist airs, showing the first practice, running 400 meters within 2 minutes. The athletes push themselves through 30 rounds, an intense challenge even for those who train regularly. Sprints last for an hour, combined with high-intensity exercises, but one member collapses before finishing. Eun-sang Lee faints in the 7th round, failing the first drill. Viewers who once supported Eun-sang after hearing his speech in the first episode turn against him after seeing the broadcast. His school bullies mock him for fainting again, calling him a pig. They even laugh at the fact that he can no longer transfer schools, now that the whole country knows about his bullying. A month and a half later, a man standing beside Byamchun watches the team climb the ropes and remarks that they move faster than monkeys. His eyes settle on Unsang, and he comments on his rapid transformation, noting that he now climbs even better than some of the others. As Unsang lands, the man observes his physique and points out how much his body has changed. At that moment, a reporter approaches Unsang and asks whether he has time for an interview. Unsang smiles and responds that he is willing to do it. The youngest staff member among the reporters blushes upon seeing Unsang Lee, realizing that he looks thinner than he did last week. As she walks alongside him, she begins to understand why his popularity vote continues to rise. Unsang calls out to the reporter, pointing out that she sometimes speaks casually with him and other times more formally. He asks her to speak casually with him from now on. The reporter calmly agrees and continues walking beside him. Reaching the interview area, Unsang sits calmly in front of a row of cameras held by the press. One of the reporters asks if he has the desire to make it to the live broadcast stage, given that he only needs to win one more match. Unsang pauses for a moment before revealing that he has no such desire. He explains that competing in this tournament was never his goal in the first place. He expresses deep gratitude and insists that he does not want to bring shame to his mentor, Byamchin Choi. As Unsang speaks about Byamchin, he recalls a past moment during training when he was holding a bridge pose using only his neck while Byamchin sat beside him, watching calmly. Byamchin had told him that training like this, which truly strengthens the body, was rare to find. Encouraging Unsang to push through, he explained the importance of strengthening the neck so that he could stay on his feet even after taking a hit. Unsang states that his only goal is to do well in what he is supposed to do, as a way of repaying what Byamchin Choi has taught him. Looking at the cameras with a cold expression, he declares that those who underestimated him because of his age will soon regret it. The interview concludes, and the manager signals the camera crew to prepare for Chulho Lee's interview next. Feeling satisfied, he notes that Unsang's interview went smoothly and predicts that the public will be even more interested once the footage is slightly edited. He comments that Unsang possesses a strong sense of showmanship, making him captivating to watch. The manager further explains that people are drawn to Unsang's story as it begins with pity, moves into frustration, then shifts into relief as he overcomes his struggles through sheer effort. He adds that the final factor in Unsang's appeal is his visual presence, as his movements and expressions are clean, simple, and naturally likable. As the fight for the semi-finals begins, the manager carefully observes Unsang, noticing that his gaze has shifted into something primal, like a wild instinct. His assistant observes the fight and comments that Unsang might struggle against his opponent in securing a spot in the semifinals. As Unsang takes a clean blow to his face, he steadies himself to avoid falling and quickly regains his stance. His opponent, Myung-sung Hwang, a 24-year-old fighter, is a champion in the 2nd Super Lightweight Boxing Championship and a former title holder in the 5th WBA Asian Welterweight Championship. Maintaining his stance, Hwang notices a flaw in Unsang's guard and an open gap he can exploit. Feeling slightly guilty about striking a high schooler, he prepares to end the fight with a decisive move. However, just as he moves in, Unsang unexpectedly closes the distance, causing Hwang to land only a light punch to his face instead. Regaining his footing, Hwang quickly launches forward again for another powerful strike, knowing that Unsang is still recovering from the previous attack. However, Unsang anticipates the move, once again stepping in closer, forcing Hwang to back off after another light punch that Unsang easily blocks. As Hwang retreats slightly, he begins to suspect that Unsang is deliberately using clinch tactics, a technique in boxing where a fighter closes the distance or holds the opponent to prevent them from landing effective punches. Glancing at Byamchin Choi, he realizes that Unsang's mentor, an expert strategist, likely wants to drain his stamina and energy. Not willing to let that happen, Hwang suddenly increases his speed and launches a rapid flurry of punches, knowing that Unsang won't be able to clinch if he keeps up the relentless attack. Employing the supreme jab technique, he wonders whether Unsang will be able to maintain his approach. Checking the time, Hwang notes that only a minute has passed since the round began, giving him ample time to counter Unsang's strategy. As he continues landing punches, he realizes that Unsang has miscalculated, as the only gaps available to exploit are a low tackle and a low kick. Wondering his advantage in those areas, he decides to use a low kick, knowing that even as a boxer, he can still execute it effectively. Quickly adjusting his movement, he circles around Unsang, keeping him in check. Meanwhile, Taesung-young's mentor observes the fight calmly, noting that Hwang lacks the ability to end it with a single strike. Instead, he will have to rely on the center hell technique. Known as center sandbag, this technique requires exceptionally fast footwork, consuming significant energy but allowing attacks from every angle. It is a fighter's most dependable yet exhausting weapon when used correctly. As Hwang relentlessly lands a series of punches on Unsang from all directions, he begins to notice that a gap is gradually forming in Unsang's defense. Sensing his opportunity, he prepares for a decisive final strike and aggressively moves in. At that moment, Unsang recalls a conversation with his mentor, Byamchin Choi. Byamchin had once asked him which fighting style he believed to be the strongest in street fights among boxing, Muay Thai, Judo, or something else. While holding a plank with Byamchin sitting on his back, Unsang had hesitated before guessing boxing or Muay Thai. However, Byamchin had immediately dismissed his answer, stating that the strongest fighter is simply the one who wins. Though Unsang initially found the statement obvious, Byamchin elaborated, explaining that there is no point in debating which martial art is superior, as each has its own set of rules. He gave an example that in a regulated fight, using clinch tactics and hugging the opponent when cornered could disrupt their rhythm and provide crucial moments to rest and minimize incoming strikes. Additionally, if a fighter sensed that they were on the verge of losing consciousness from repeated hits, they could attempt a takedown, forcing themselves to the ground and buying 10 seconds of recovery time. However, Byamchin pointed out that street fights followed different rules, as clinch tactics only made it easier for an opponent to land a devastating knee strike, and attempting a takedown could leave a fighter vulnerable to a single knockout blow. He concluded that no athlete was flawless and the key was to find and exploit the opponent's weakness. As Hwang closes in for his final attack, Unsang suddenly executes a free reap, sweeping Hwang's foothold to destabilize him and forcing him to fall hard onto the ground. The crowd erupts in shock, while Byamchin remains composed, observing Unsang's immediate counterattack. Without hesitation, Unsang follows up by launching rapid punches at Hwang as he lies off balance on the mat. Recalling his mentor's advice to open his shoulders wide and unleash every last ounce of his energy at critical moments, Unsang realizes that failing to seize this golden opportunity could cost him the match. Determined, he intensifies his assault, landing punch after punch with growing force. Hwang, in his final moments of clarity, recognizes his fatal mistake of losing control of his position just once had cost him the entire fight. Unsang delivers a final barrage of blows, ultimately knocking Hwang unconscious. The referee swiftly intervenes, separating them and calling an end to the match. Moments later, the official announcement is made and Unsang Lee emerges victorious against Myung-sung Hwang, one of the top 3 winning candidates. With a technical knockout victory in just 2 minutes and 35 seconds, Unsang secures his place in the semifinals. Chapter 3, Unsang continues his rigorous training, enduring intense muscle pain that lasts for months. Even a light touch makes him wince, yet he refuses to slow down, determined to transform himself completely. On the day of his semifinal match, he walks forward with confidence. The crowd erupts with cheers, with fans praising both his strength and his appearance. As he takes in the overwhelming atmosphere, he notices that the excitement surrounding this match is far greater than before. However, he quickly shifts his attention to his opponent and acknowledges his unfortunate situation, as his semifinal opponent is Byamju Shim, a national wrestling athlete in the cruiserweight division, weighing 91 kilograms. As soon as the match begins, Unsang is knocked down in an instant. Lying on the ground, he smiles, recognizing that his loss is not meaningless. Standing beside him, Shim appears composed, while Unsang understands that this defeat earns him applause for his efforts as a 17-year-old amateur. News of his journey spreads quickly, with television broadcasts and newspapers covering his transformation from a bullied high schooler to a coming fist semifinalist. A few days later, Unsang returns to school. Entering the classroom hidden beneath a cap, hoodie, and mask, he avoids immediate recognition. His classmates exchange whispers, unsure of the student's identity. As he reaches his desk and removes his disguise, they confirm that it is indeed Unsang. However, he ignores them and approaches Dae-hoon Lee, a 17-year-old student known as Big Boned. The classroom falls silent. Unlike a typical contestant from Coming Fist, who might receive enthusiastic praise, Unsang carries a different presence, one shaped by his past as an easy target for school bullies. Standing beside Dae-hoon, he states that he arrived at school later than him that day. Dae-hoon remains quiet, seemingly puzzled, until Unsang reminds him of how he used to beat him every time he arrived later. No matter how early Unsang had come, Dae-hoon had always demanded that he be earlier, reinforcing the rule with violence. Dae-hoon laughs before turning toward him, remarking that he must have spent the holidays overthinking imaginary scenarios. However, as he stands up, his amusement fades. Observing Unsang closely, he realizes that he has grown taller. He acknowledges the change, commenting on his height. Unsang, however, responds coldly, calling him an idiot and pointing out that he only seems taller because Dae-hoon remains the same height as when they first met. At that moment, Unsang recalls Byamchan's words about battle. His mentor had asked if he was familiar with the saying that knowing both one's enemy and oneself prevents danger in 100 battles. When Unsang had agreed, Byamchan had told him to focus only on himself for now, emphasizing that understanding oneself is far more important than analyzing others. He had added that humans waste too much time trying to grasp their own behavior and abilities. Byamchan had quickly turned his attention to the results of Unsang Lee's Big 5 personality test, revealing each factor one by one. Conscientiousness had stood at 85, openness at 55, extroversion at 34, and neuroticism at 38. Before disclosing the final score, he had paused, stating that this particular trait had been Unsang's biggest problem. His agreeableness had reached an astonishing 97. Unsang had listened awkwardly as Byamchan had explained that this score had been much higher than usual. He had elaborated that individuals with high agreeableness had tended to empathize easily, feel pity more readily, and had been naturally sympathetic toward those in difficult situations. At that moment, Unsang had recalled an incident from his school life, when he had witnessed a boy being bullied by classmates. As Byamchan had continued, he had described such individuals as courageous and honest, traits that had often compelled them to intervene in unjust situations. Unsang had remembered stepping in to protect the bullied student, only to have become the new target himself. Byamchan had then stated that highly agreeable people had generally disliked conflict and had struggled with aggressive negotiation, concluding that Unsang had fundamentally lacked the ability to resolve such problems effectively. Reflecting on the countless times he had suffered at the hands of bullies, Unsang had listened carefully as Byamchan had clarified that while this trait hadn't been inherently bad, it had been his choice to act on it that had led to his downfall. However, Byamchan had reassured him that, with proper training, he would also learn to compete mentally. Repeating himself with confidence, he had asserted that every disciple under his guidance had been bound to succeed. Byamchan had then laid out his objective to strengthen Unsang's ability to be more assertive and less overly sympathetic. Meanwhile, back in the classroom, Dae-hoon's expression darkens upon hearing Unsang call him an idiot. Angered, he accuses him of arrogance after gaining fame and immediately throws a punch at him. However, Dae-hoon abruptly halts as a noise catches his attention. Turning toward the main door of the classroom, he notices their homeroom teacher entering. The teacher quickly takes in the situation and asks what is going on. Unsang briefly glances at him, realizing the timing is perfect. Without hesitation, he swings an arm around Dae-hoon's shoulder and denies any conflict, casually claiming they were just joking around. Dae-hoon stands frozen in shock as the teacher, seemingly convinced by Unsang's words, instructs them to take their seats. Unsang readily complies but leans in to whisper in Dae-hoon's ear, reminding him that he had once used the same excuse when they had been summoned to the teacher's office at the start of the semester. At that moment, Dae-hoon recalls the incident, remembering how he had claimed they were not fighting but rather close friends. Unsang coldly remarks that Dae-hoon had used that excuse for his own benefit, whereas he has just used it to save Dae-hoon. He lightly smacks the back of Dae-hoon's head before walking away, leaving him stunned. As the period ends, Two students begin speculating whether Eun-sang will actually fight Dae-hoon, noting his boldness in standing up to the infamous big-boned Dae-hoon. However, one of them argues that Dae-hoon has already lost, pointing out that Eun-sang's skills are undeniable, given that he reached the top 4 in Coming Fist Season 2. Glancing at Eun-sang, the student continues, claiming that not only martial arts enthusiasts but the entire community is buzzing about him as he is just a mere amateur high schooler who managed to defeat one of the tournament's strongest fighters. He describes Eun-sang as persistent, stating that no one else could have transformed so drastically and gained such skill in just 2 months. As the bell rings, Eun-sang becomes acutely aware of his nervousness. He is back in school, the place where he had once been relentlessly bullied. However, he quickly recalls his mentor Byam-chin Choi's advice to stay composed and fight just as he trained. The memory brings to mind a basic striking technique Byam-chin had taught him, explaining that it is the quickest way to set an opponent up for a decisive takedown. Rising from his seat, Eun-sang remembers Byam-chin's words that the technique does not rely on understanding complex combinations of punches. Approaching Dae-hoon, he recalls his mentor mentioning that there is something unique about it. Before he has time to react, Dae-hoon angrily lunges forward, giving Eun-sang no opportunity to dodge. However, relying on his training, Eun-sang swiftly evades the attack. As Dae-hoon's fist swings past him, Eun-sang uses the momentum to seize his arm and grip his collar. With a quick pivot, he rotates and forcefully slams Dae-hoon onto the ground. Watching him lie unconscious, Eun-sang acknowledges the effectiveness of Byam-chin's technique, realizing that the fight has ended exactly as his mentor predicted, without the need to land a single strike. Chapter 4. Seeing the incident unfold, the entire class falls into stunned silence. Eun-sang scans the room, noting the blank expressions on their faces. The unfamiliar reaction feels strange, yet he finds himself pleased that it is not the same as always. His attention quickly shifts back to Dae-hoon, who starts coughing as he struggles to his feet. Eun-sang watches him with narrowed eyes, understanding that the real challenge begins now. With a slight smile, he expresses mild surprise, admitting he hadn't expected Dae-hoon to stand up so quickly. Without hesitation, he remarks that Dae-hoon should be grateful as Eun-sang had chosen not to beat him further. He firmly states that this was merely a warning, in case Dae-hoon ever considers attacking him again. Dae-hoon remains frozen, his shock evident. Eun-sang then recalls a conversation with his mentor, Byam-chin Choi, who once admitted that he had been even worse off than Eun-sang during his school days. Shocked, Eun-sang had looked at him in disbelief as Byam-chin casually revealed that he had been beaten up around 30 times by a kid who tormented him daily. Still trying to process the revelation, Eun-sang had asked who would even dare to lay a hand on Byam-chin, a professional athlete. Smirking, Byam-chin had turned the question back on him, asking if Eun-sang truly believed he had always been strong. When Eun-sang hesitated before agreeing, Byam-chin had erupted into laughter, explaining that he had once been small and had started sports much later than others. As he grew up, Byam-chin had often wondered why he had been the one getting beaten every day. He mentioned that those same bullies never even attended class reunions, likely because they knew what he had become. Glancing at Eun-sang, Byam-chin had reassured him that there was no reason to fear anyone. After all, Eun-sang had the backing of Korea's highest-paid fighter, his own mentor, Byam-chin Choi. Meanwhile, Dae-hoon stands frozen before Eun-sang, fully aware that the person in front of him is nothing like the one he used to torment. The shift in Eun-sang's aura feels overwhelming, making him even more uneasy. His attention flickers to the crowd, where whispers circulate about the downfall of big-boned Dae-hoon. The students murmur that he seems afraid, unable to back up his tough talk. Hearing their words loud and clear, Dae-hoon gets angry in frustration. Just as he is about to react, his eyes snap back to Eun-sang, only to widen in shock as Eun-sang is already mid-kick. With no time to block or dodge, Dae-hoon takes a direct hit to the face. As he crashes to the floor, Eun-sang towers over him, his expression cold. He questions whether Dae-hoon really has the confidence to look away in the middle of a fight. Clutching his face in pain, Dae-hoon barely registers Eun-sang calling him an idiot, mocking him for believing he wouldn't attack just because he was distracted. At that moment, A group of gang members enters the classroom, only to freeze in shock after noticing Dae-hoon sprawled on the floor, groaning in pain. As Yoon-sang's gaze shifts to the approaching gang members, he remains calm, fully aware that there is no turning back now that he has injured Dae-hoon. The atmosphere in the classroom grows tense as the students recognize the group as the same gang members who once tormented Eun-sang. The realization hits even harder when they notice Jongdae Choi himself has come in person. Jongdae steps forward, his expression unreadable as he fixes his cold stare on Eun-sang. He states that he originally came to the class to commend Eun-sang for his impressive performance, but now that Dae-hoon has been taken down, his expectations have been completely shattered. Their eyes stay locked, neither moving as the tension grows. The crowd watches, waiting to see what will happen next.